A black girl with a white dad shows an SOS sign to a police officer. The cop quickly springs into action, sensing something is terribly wrong. What could the girl's father be hiding from the cop? Can the sheriff protect her? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. And if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. The sun cast shadows across the gas station's concrete surface as Sheriff Tom Anderson pulled his patrol car up to one of the pumps. He'd done this routine hundreds of times before, but something caught his eye today. A young black girl, maybe 10 years old, standing beside a white pickup truck at the adjacent pump. Tom's trained eye noticed her posture first. Her shoulders were hunched, and she kept shifting her weight from foot to foot, her eyes darting around the station like a nervous bird. The contrast between her pristine white sneakers and careful braids against her anxious demeanor raised a flag in his mind. A white man in his late 30s emerged from the truck's driver's side. His worn jeans and faded t-shirt were unremarkable, but there was something about the way the girl stiffened when he walked past that made Tom's instincts sharpen. As Tom began fueling his patrol car, he maintained a casual watch. The man, Jack, walked to the pump, leaving the girl alone by the truck. That's when it happened. The girl's eyes met Tom's directly, and her small hands moved in a deliberate pattern. 3 short movements, 3 longer ones, 3 short again. SOS. Tom's heart rate picked up, but his face remained calm. 20 years on the force had taught him the value of appearing relaxed even when his mind was racing. He watched as the girl repeated the signal, her movements subtle enough that anyone not looking for them would miss them completely. "Everything okay over there?" Tom called out, his voice friendly and even. He started walking over, his boots making soft scuffing sounds against the pavement. The girl's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't move away. Jack was still occupied with the pump, his back turned. "I'm Sheriff Anderson," Tom said, crouching down to the girl's eye level. He kept his movements slow and gentle, like approaching a spooked deer. "But folks around here just call me Tom." Her hands trembled as she reached into her pocket, pulling out a carefully folded piece of paper. In one smooth movement, she pressed it into his hand just as the click of the gas pump signaled it was full. Jack's footsteps approached, and Tom smoothly tucked the note into his uniform pocket. Standing up, he nodded at Jack, who had appeared beside them. "Afternoon," Tom said pleasantly. "Beautiful day for a drive." Jack's shoulders tensed as he turned to face Sheriff Tom. "Is there something wrong here, Sheriff?" His voice carried a defensive edge that made Tom's internal alarm bells ring louder. "Not at all," Tom replied, keeping his tone light and friendly. "Just doing my job, making sure everyone's safe and sound." He glanced at Mia, who had pressed herself against the truck's door. "Your daughter seems a bit nervous." Jack's jaw tightened. "What are you implying?" "Nothing at all," Tom said, maintaining his calm demeanor. "Just noticed you two have different..." He paused deliberately. "Backgrounds. I'm naturally curious about folks passing through our town." Jack's expression shifted and he ran a hand through his hair. "Look, I was married to her mother. She was black. We divorced 3 years ago, and then she passed away shortly after." He spoke quickly, as if reciting something he'd said many times before. "I have sole custody now. We're just traveling through, heading to visit some family." Tom nodded slowly, noting how Mia's eyes remained fixed on the ground, her small fingers fidgeting with the hem of her t-shirt. The story sounded rehearsed, too smooth around the edges. "That must have been tough," Tom said, watching Jack's reactions carefully. "How long have you had custody?" "Since her mother died," Jack replied, his words coming out sharp and quick. "Listen, Sheriff, I appreciate your concern, but we really need to get going. Long drive ahead." Tom noticed how Mia flinched slightly when Jack moved closer to her. Her eyes darted up to meet Tom's for just a moment, before dropping back to the ground. Everything about her body language screamed distress, but without concrete evidence or cause for detention, Tom knew his hands were tied. For now. "Of course," Tom said, stepping back. "Drive safely now." He watched as Jack opened the passenger door for Mia, who climbed in without a word. Jack walked around to the driver's side, started the engine, and pulled away from the pump. The white pickup truck grew smaller as it disappeared down the highway. Only when the truck was completely out of sight did Tom reach into his pocket and unfold the note Mia had pressed into his hand. His heart sank as he read the desperate words scrawled across the crumpled paper. "Please help me. He's taking me away." The words hit him like a physical blow. Precious minutes had slipped away while the note burned a hole in his pocket. "Damn it," he muttered, shoving the note into his shirt pocket. He jumped into his patrol car, the engine roaring to life. The tires squealed against the pavement as he accelerated onto the highway, his heart pounding against his ribs. "Dispatch, this is Sheriff Anderson." He spoke into his radio, his voice steady despite his racing pulse. "I need all available units to be on lookout for a white pickup truck, an older model Ford, heading east on Highway 23. License plate starts with XRJ. Male driver, approximately late 30s, traveling with a young black female, around 10 years old. Possible child endangerment situation." The radio crackled with Deputy Sarah Martinez's response. "Copy that, Sheriff. I'm about 5 miles ahead of your position. We'll start monitoring eastbound traffic." Tom eased off the accelerator as he spotted a white speck in the distance. Through his windshield, he could make out the distinct shape of Jack's truck. His grip tightened on the steering wheel as he maintained a careful distance, just close enough to keep the vehicle in sight but far enough to avoid detection. "I've got eyes on the vehicle," Tom reported quietly into his radio. "Following at a distance, no sirens. Don't want to spook him." The truck moved steadily along the highway, neither too fast nor too slow, nothing that would draw attention. Tom watched as Jack signaled and turned off the main road, heading into a neighborhood where paint peeled from weathered houses and chain-link fences lined cracked sidewalks. Tom followed, keeping 3 car lengths between them. His mind raced through possible scenarios, weighing the risks of each potential action. One wrong move could put Mia in danger. He needed to be smart about this, needed to wait for the right moment. The setting sun cast long shadows across the rundown neighborhood as Tom carefully maneuvered his patrol car, keeping Jack's truck in sight. Broken glass glittered on the sidewalks, and graffiti marked the walls of abandoned buildings. This wasn't a place for a child. Jack's truck lurched to a stop in front of a house with peeling yellow paint and boarded-up windows. Tom pulled over half a block away, positioning his car behind a large oak tree. His stomach tightened as he watched Jack yank open the passenger door. "Come on, get out!" Jack's voice carried through the quiet street. He grabbed Mia's arm, pulling her from the truck. Mia stumbled, her feet dragging against the cracked concrete. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I want to go home." Jack's grip tightened. "This is home now, stop making a scene." Tom's jaw clenched as he watched Mia look around desperately, her eyes scanning the street. She caught sight of his partially hidden patrol car, and relief flickered across her face before Jack pulled her toward the house. Tom watched as Jack fumbled with a key, shoving Mia through the front door. The screen door slammed behind them, its rusty hinges squealing in protest. Through a gap in the threadbare curtains, Tom could see movement inside, shadows passing back and forth. Tom kept his eyes fixed on the house, noting every detail. A broken porch step, a single light flickering to life in what appeared to be the living room. Mia's small figure passing by the window, Jack's larger shadow close behind. The neighborhood felt unnaturally still, as if holding its breath. Tom checked his weapon, then his watch. 1 minute until backup arrived. He could hear Mia's words from the note echoing in his mind. "Please help me. He's taking me away." The evening air grew heavier as Tom watched from his concealed position. His patrol car blended with the shadows of the oak tree, giving him a clear view of the yellow house. Through the gap in the curtains, he could see Jack roughly steering Mia toward what looked like a living room. "Please stop," Mia's muffled voice carried through the thin walls. "You're hurting me." Tom's fingers tightened around his radio. The neighborhood around him was eerily quiet, broken only by distant sirens and the occasional bark of a stray dog. Graffiti-covered walls and broken windows spoke of the area's reputation. This was no place for a child. "Martinez," Tom spoke softly into his radio to his partner. "I need you to run a check for me. Looking for any missing child reports from this morning. Female, African American, approximately 10 years old. dark braided hair, wearing a blue t-shirt and jeans, about 4'6". While waiting for a response, Tom scanned the perimeter of the house. 2 exits, the front door and what appeared to be a back door visible through a narrow alley. The windows, though mostly intact, were grimy and partially boarded. A rusty chain-link fence surrounded the small yard, its gate hanging loose on broken hinges. Movement caught his eye. Mia appeared at one of the windows, pressing her palm against the glass before Jack yanked her away. Tom's heart raced, but he forced himself to remain still. Rushing in without backup in this neighborhood could make things worse. "Sheriff," Sarah's voice crackled through the radio. "We've got a match. Report filed this morning by Jennifer and Mark Thompson, foster parents. Girl's name is Mia Thompson. Biological father, Jack Reynolds, took her from school without authorization. He lost custody 2 years ago due to drug-related charges." Tom's jaw tightened. "Copy that, Martinez. I'm going to approach the house once backup arrives. Tell units to come in quiet. We don't want to spook him." "Understood, Sheriff. Units are 1 minute out." Tom kept his eyes fixed on the house, watching shadows move behind the curtains. Each second felt like an eternity, knowing Mia was inside, scared and hoping for help. The neighborhood's reputation for drug activity made the situation even more volatile. He couldn't risk waiting too long, but he also couldn't risk making a wrong move. The streetlights flickered to life as Tom quietly closed his car door. His boots made soft scraping sounds against the cracked sidewalk as he approached the yellow house. The peeling paint and crooked house numbers told a story of neglect, matching the rest of the rundown neighborhood. Tom's hand rested instinctively on his belt as he climbed the creaky porch steps. Taking a deep breath, he rapped his knuckles firmly against the weathered door. The sound echoed through the quiet evening air, but no response came from inside. Through the dirty window, he caught a glimpse of movement, shadows shifting in what looked like hurried motion. Tom's jaw tightened as he knocked again, harder this time. "This is Sheriff Anderson," he called out, keeping his voice steady but firm. "I need to ask you a few questions." More silence followed, but now he could hear muffled voices from inside. Something crashed, followed by what sounded like harsh whispers. Tom's hand moved closer to his weapon, though he hoped he wouldn't need it. Just as he reached for his radio to call for backup, the floorboards inside creaked. The door opened just enough to reveal Jack's face, half hidden in shadow. His eyes darted nervously between Tom and the street behind him. "Sheriff," Jack said, trying to sound casual, but his voice carried an edge of tension. "Didn't expect to see you again so soon. Is there a problem?" Tom maintained his professional demeanor, though his instincts were screaming that something was very wrong. "I need to verify Mia's identity and see some documentation of your guardianship, if you don't mind." Before Jack could respond, there was a sudden commotion from inside. Mia burst into view, her eyes wide with hope as she spotted Tom. Her braids were slightly disheveled, and her blue t-shirt was wrinkled, but her face showed unmistakable relief at seeing him there. She ran and came to him through the door that was slightly ajar. Tom kept one hand protectively near Mia while maintaining a professional stance. "Sir, I need to see some documentation proving your guardianship of Mia. Birth certificate, court papers, anything official." Jack's face twitched as he glanced between Tom and Mia. I told you already. She's my daughter." His voice cracked slightly. "Look, this is ridiculous. We're just passing through." "That's not what I asked," Tom said calmly, noting how Jack's hands were shaking. "Do you have any legal documentation showing your relationship to Mia?" Sweat beaded on Jack's forehead despite the cool evening air. He took a step backward, his eyes darting toward the house's interior. "The papers they're somewhere in my truck. Just let me—" "He's lying." Mia's quiet voice cut through the tension. She pressed closer to Tom's side, her small frame trembling, but her voice growing stronger. "He's been taking me places I don't want to go. I tried to tell people, but nobody listened." Tom's protective instincts surged as he heard the fear in her voice. He kept his eyes fixed on Jack, who had grown increasingly agitated. "Sir, based on Mia's statement and your inability to provide any proof of guardianship, I'm placing you under arrest." Tom's voice remained steady as he reached for his handcuffs. "Please turn around and place your hands behind your back." This is crazy, Jack protested, taking another step back. You can't. I can and I am, Tom interrupted firmly. Turn around now, sir. Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. Jack's shoulders slumped in defeat as he slowly complied. Tom efficiently secured the handcuffs while reciting the Miranda rights, keeping himself positioned between Jack and Mia. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Tom continued the familiar words while guiding Jack toward the patrol car. He opened the rear door and carefully helped Jack into the back seat, then turned to Mia. You'll be riding up front with me, okay? You're safe now. Mia nodded, relief washing over her face as she climbed into the passenger seat. Tom reached for his radio, calling for backup as he settled behind the wheel. Inside the police station's soft-lit interview room, Tom watched as Officer Martinez sat with Mia, offering her a cup of hot chocolate and speaking in gentle tones. The girl's shoulders had finally begun to relax, though her eyes still darted occasionally toward the door. She's in good hands, Tom assured himself, just as hurried footsteps echoed down the hallway. Jennifer and Mark Thompson, Mia's foster parents, burst through the door, their faces etched with worry. Jennifer's hand flew to her mouth at the sight of Mia, while Mark's jaw tightened visibly. Oh, thank God, Jennifer breathed, rushing forward as Mia jumped up to embrace her. Mark joined them, wrapping his arms around both of them. After giving them a moment, Tom gestured to the chairs. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, if we could talk for a moment? They settled around the table, Jennifer keeping one arm firmly around Mia's shoulders. Mark cleared his throat, his voice thick with emotion. Sheriff, we need to explain about Jack. He's Mia's biological father, Jennifer began, her hand unconsciously tightening around Mia's shoulder. He was married to Lisa, Mia's mother. She was such a wonderful woman. Her voice trailed off. Mark picked up the thread. After Lisa passed away 3 years ago, Jack's drinking got worse. He'd always struggled with alcohol, but losing Lisa, he shook his head. CPS got involved when neighbors reported concerning behavior. Jack would leave Mia alone for days, Jennifer added softly. Sometimes there wasn't any food in the house, that's when we became her foster parents. Tom nodded, making notes while keeping his expression neutral. And you've had legal custody since then? Yes, Mark confirmed. Jack was deemed unfit. He's made attempts to get clean, but... He glanced at Mia, who was studying her hands in her lap. Jennifer straightened in her chair. We want to press charges. This can't happen again. Her voice was firm, though her hands trembled slightly. Tom pulled out the necessary forms. I'll need you to fill these out. We'll make sure Jack faces consequences for his actions today. As Jennifer and Mark began working on the paperwork, Tom watched Mia's face brighten with relief, finally feeling safe in the presence of her true family. Then, Tom led Jack from his holding cell to the interview room. Jack's shoulders were slumped, his face showing the weight of a sleepless night. Sheriff, Jack said as they sat down, his voice hoarse. I need to talk to you. Just us. He glanced at the door. It's about Mia. Tom nodded to the guard, who stepped outside. Go ahead, Jack. I know how this looks, Jack began, running his hands through his disheveled hair. But everything I did, it was because I love her. She's my little girl. His voice cracked. I just wanted another chance to be her dad. Tom sat quietly, studying Jack's face. Years of experience had taught him to look beyond words, to search for truth in the subtle signs of body language and tone. I'll do whatever it takes, Jack continued, leaning forward. I'll get clean. Really clean this time. Go to meetings, therapy, whatever you say. He swallowed hard. I can't lose her again. Jack, Tom said carefully, keeping his voice level. I understand you care about Mia, but caring isn't enough. She needs stability, safety. I can give her that. Jack's fist hit the table, making the metal surface ring. He immediately pulled back, looking ashamed. Sorry, I'm her father. Doesn't that count for something? Tom leaned forward, meeting Jack's desperate gaze. It does count. But what counts more is Mia's well-being. Your history with alcohol, the incidents that led to CPS involvement. These aren't just past mistakes, they're patterns that put Mia at risk. But I can change, Jack insisted, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. Please, Sheriff, help me get another chance. The Thompsons are pressing charges, Jack, Tom said firmly. What you did yesterday, taking Mia against her will, that wasn't love, that was control, and it scared her. Jack's face fell, the last remnants of hope draining away. His shoulders slumped further as the reality of his situation sank in. She's safe now, Tom continued, and keeping her safe has to be the priority, even if that means you can't be in her life right now. Jack's jaw clenched, his eyes growing wet with frustrated tears. Without another word, Tom stood and motioned for the guard to return. As they led Jack back to his cell, Tom watched him shuffle away, the weight of his choices visible in every step. A week later, the courthouse buzzed with quiet tension as Jack entered, wearing an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs. His eyes darted around the room, landing briefly on Jennifer and Mark before dropping to the floor. Sheriff Tom stood near the back, his presence a silent reminder of that fateful day at the gas station. Judge Ramirez, a stern-faced woman with graying hair, studied the papers before her. Mr. Reynolds, you stand accused of attempted parental abduction. How do you plead? Guilty, Your Honor, Jack's voice wavered. But I'd like to explain. The judge held up her hand. I have reviewed your case thoroughly, Mr. Reynolds. This includes your history of alcohol abuse, the CPS reports, and the circumstances that led to your daughter being placed in foster care. Jennifer squeezed Mark's hand as they sat in the gallery. Their faces showed the strain of recent weeks, but their posture remained resolute. Your Honor, Jack spoke again, his voice thick with emotion. I know I've made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but I'm trying to change. Mia is my daughter, and I just wanted… Mr. Reynolds, the judge interrupted. Wanting to be with your child is natural, but your actions show a pattern of putting your desires above your daughter's well-being. Jennifer stood when called to testify. Mia has nightmares about that day, she said, her voice steady but pained. She's afraid to go places alone now. We've had to start her in therapy. Mark followed, describing how they'd worked for years to help Mia feel secure, only to have that security shattered by Jack's actions. The judge listened intently before turning back to Jack. Mr. Reynolds, your history of addiction, combined with this recent violent attempt to take your daughter, demonstrates that you remain a significant risk to Mia's safety and well-being. Jack's shoulders slumped as she continued. I hereby sentence you to 10 years in state prison, with the possibility of parole after serving 7 years. The bailiff stepped forward as Jack's head dropped, tears falling onto the defendant's table. Jennifer and Mark watched silently as he was led away, their relief tinged with sadness for what could have been. Sheriff Tom moved toward the exit, watching Jack disappear through the side door. Jack's 10-year sentence meant he would spend a decade reflecting on the choices that had led him to this point. As the door closed behind him, Tom felt a sense of closure, knowing that Mia would now be safe with her foster family. The Thompsons gathered their things, ready to return home to Mia and continue the work of healing. For them, the road ahead wasn't without challenges, but they were ready to support Mia as she continued to heal and grow. The Thompsons were determined to provide her with the stable, loving home she deserved, guiding her through the years to come. Under their care, Mia flourished. Through their support, she grew up surrounded by encouragement and the quiet strength of a family that truly cared. As the years passed, Mia became a bright, compassionate young woman, developing a deep sense of empathy and resilience. She remained close to her foster parents, who encouraged her every step of the way, celebrating her successes and offering comfort through any doubts. Now, working as a nurse, Mia's gentle smile and kind eyes were a source of comfort for her patients. Her presence at the hospital became a beacon of warmth for worried families and frightened children. One day, when she was driving home, she thought about how far she'd come from that frightened little girl at the gas station. Her foster parents' unwavering support had made all the difference. Walking through the front door of her childhood home, she found Jennifer and Mark in the kitchen. The familiar smell of Jennifer's lasagna filled the air. There's our girl, Jennifer said warmly, pulling Mia into a tight hug. How was your shift? Good, Mia smiled, sinking into a kitchen chair. Had a young patient today who reminded me of myself, actually. She was scared, but just needed someone to listen. Mark placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. You've always had that gift, knowing just what others need. We couldn't be prouder of the woman you've become. But you know what? Mia continued, squeezing Jennifer's hand. Every time I help a patient through their fear or pain, I remember how you both helped me through mine. You showed me what parents are supposed to be. Mark's voice was thick with emotion. You were always meant to be our daughter, Mia. They had never told her she was adopted, and over the years, as she grew up surrounded by their love, Mia had forgotten any memory of a life before the Thompsons. The day you came into our lives, Jennifer added, everything changed. Watching you grow, helping you heal, seeing you become this amazing woman who helps others, it's been the greatest gift. They gathered around the kitchen table, the warmth of family love filling the room. Jennifer served the lasagna while Mark poured glasses of iced tea, just like they had done countless times before. It was a simple moment, but for Mia it held everything: belonging, acceptance, and the steady certainty of unconditional love. Next evening, the hospital parking lot was dimly lit as Mia walked toward her car, her footsteps echoing in the quiet evening. She adjusted her purse strap, tired after a long shift of caring for patients. That's when she felt it, the unmistakable sensation of being watched. Glancing over her shoulder, she spotted a man standing near the hospital entrance. He was middle-aged, disheveled, and his eyes were fixed directly on her. Something about his stance made her stomach tighten with anxiety. Mia quickened her pace, her heart beginning to race. The sound of footsteps behind her confirmed her fears. He was following her. She clutched her car keys tightly, remembering the self-defense techniques she'd learned years ago. The drive home felt endless. Every red light seemed to last forever as she checked her rearview mirror repeatedly. When she finally pulled into her foster parents' driveway, she practically ran to the front door. "Dad?" Mia called out as she burst inside, her voice shaking. "Dad, are you here?" Mark emerged from the kitchen, immediately concerned by the fear in her voice. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" "There was this man at the hospital," Mia explained, her words tumbling out. "He followed me to my car. I don't know if he followed me home, but..." She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to stop trembling. Jennifer appeared beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "You're safe now, honey." Mark's expression hardened. "Stay inside with your mother. I'll go check things out." Outside, Mark scanned the street, his protective instincts on high alert. That's when he saw him, a figure lurking near the streetlight. As Mark approached, recognition hit him like a physical blow. Despite the years and the obvious signs of continued alcohol abuse, he knew that face. It was Jack. He looked terrible, unshaven, clothes wrinkled, swaying slightly where he stood. The smell of alcohol reached Mark before he even got close. "You need to leave," Mark said firmly, keeping his voice low to avoid alerting Mia inside. "That's my daughter in there," Jack slurred, pointing unsteadily at the house. "I got a right to see her." "Not like this, you don't," Mark replied, standing his ground. "You're drunk, Jack. Go home. This isn't the way." Jack took an unsteady step forward. "You can't keep her from me. I'm her real father." "And right now you're in no condition to see her," Mark said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Leave now, or I'm calling the police." Jack wavered, conflict clear on his face. Finally, he turned away, stumbling slightly as he walked into the darkness. Mark watched until Jack disappeared from sight before heading back inside. He found Jennifer and Mia in the living room, Mia still visibly shaken. "Everything's clear now," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "You're safe, sweetheart." Later that night, after Mia had gone up to bed, Mark and Jennifer sat at the kitchen table, their faces grave. "We need to tell her," Jennifer whispered, clutching her coffee mug. "About the adoption, about Jack, everything." Mark nodded slowly. "She deserves to know, especially now that he's out and clearly still struggling." Saturday morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows as Mia sipped her coffee, still shaken from the previous night's events. Jennifer and Mark exchanged meaningful glances across the breakfast table, their untouched toast growing cold. "Sweetheart," Jennifer began softly, "there's something we need to talk about." Mia looked up, noticing the seriousness in her foster mother's tone. Mark reached across the table, taking her hand gently. "The man you saw last night, we know who he is," Mark said, his voice steady but gentle. "He's your biological father, Jack. He was recently released from prison." Mia's coffee cup clattered against its saucer. "My... what?" Her voice came out barely above a whisper. Jennifer moved closer, wrapping an arm around Mia's shoulders. "We've wanted to tell you for so long, honey. Jack struggled with alcohol addiction when you were very young. After your mother passed away, things got worse." "My mother?" Mia's eyes filled with tears. "What happened to her?" "Her name was Lisa," Mark explained. "She divorced Jack when his drinking became too much, but she passed away shortly after. Jack couldn't cope and his addiction spiraled. Child Protective Services had to step in." Mia sat in stunned silence, processing each word. "Why didn't you tell me before?" Her voice trembled with a mix of hurt and confusion. "We wanted to give you stability, a chance at a normal childhood," Jennifer explained, her own eyes glistening. "We were going to tell you when you were older, but the right time never seemed to come." "All those years," Mia shook her head. "I always wondered why I looked different from you both. I just assumed." "We love you as our own, Mia," Mark assured her. "That's never been anything but true." Mia wiped her eyes, straightening in her chair. "Tell me about him, about Jack. What was he like?" Jennifer and Mark shared the story of Jack's struggles, his attempts at recovery, and the events that led to his imprisonment. Mia listened intently, occasionally asking questions about her early childhood and her mother. "I think..." Mia paused, gathering her thoughts. "I think I want to meet him. I need to understand where I came from." Jennifer squeezed her hand. "We understand, sweetheart. Whatever you decide, we're here for you." "We just want you to be careful," Mark added. "From what we saw last night, he might still be struggling with his addiction." Mia nodded slowly, her mind racing with this new information. "I need some time to think about all this, but I know I want to meet him. I need to." "Take all the time you need," Jennifer assured her. "We'll support whatever decision you make." Mia sat quietly, her breakfast forgotten, as she tried to reconcile her past with her present. The love she felt for her foster parents remained unchanged, but now there was something else too, a need to understand the other half of her story. She then headed straight to Jack's house after getting his address from her father. Mia's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as she pulled up to the address Mark had given her. The apartment building stood weathered and gray against the morning sky, its paint peeling and gutters sagging. Taking a deep breath, she stepped out of her car and walked to the entrance, her heart pounding with each step. The stairwell smelled of stale cigarettes as she climbed to the third floor. Apartment 3C stood before her, its brass numbers hanging slightly crooked. Mia raised her hand to knock, then hesitated. After a moment's pause, she rapped gently on the door. Shuffling sounds came from inside, followed by the click of locks. The door creaked open, revealing Jack. His hair was unkempt and dark circles shadowed his eyes. He wore wrinkled clothes that hung loosely on his frame. "Mia?" His voice cracked. I can't believe you're here." "Hi, Jack," she said quietly, using his name for the first time. Tears welled in his eyes. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, "for everything, for not being there, for hurting you." His words tumbled out, heavy with emotion. "Can we talk?" Mia asked, maintaining her composure despite the surge of feelings inside her. Jack nodded quickly, stepping back to let her in. The apartment was small and sparse, with minimal furniture and bare walls. They sat at a tiny kitchen table, the morning light casting long shadows across the floor. "After your mother died," Jack began, his hands fidgeting on the table, "I couldn't handle it. The drinking got worse. I know that's no excuse for what I did to you, but I want you to understand." Mia listened as Jack described his descent into addiction, how grief and alcohol had twisted him into someone he didn't recognize. His voice trembled as he spoke about the years he'd missed, the birthdays and milestones he could never get back. "I've thought about you every day," he said, wiping his eyes. "Wondering if you were happy, if you were safe." "I was," Mia assured him. "Jennifer and Mark, they're good people. They gave me a loving home." Jack nodded, shame crossing his face. "They did what I couldn't." Mia leaned forward slightly. "It's not too late to change, Jack. But you need to stop drinking. Get help. Show me you mean what you're saying." Fresh tears spilled down Jack's cheeks. "I will. I promise, Mia. I'll do whatever it takes. I just want a chance to make things right." "Then prove it," she said gently but firmly. "I'll support you if you're serious about recovery." "I am," Jack promised, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll do it. For you. For us." Mia climbed the stairs to Jack's apartment the next morning, a stack of glossy pamphlets tucked under her arm. Her nursing badge still hung around her neck. She'd come straight from her early shift. She knocked on the door, and this time Jack answered more quickly. "I brought something for you," she said, stepping inside. Jack looked better than yesterday. He'd shaved and changed his clothes, though his hands still trembled slightly. They sat at the kitchen table, and Mia spread out the pamphlets. "This is the rehab program at my hospital. I've seen it help so many people, Jack." Jack picked up one of the brochures, his expression guarded. "I don't know, Mia. What if I can't do it? What if I fail?" "I work with patients in recovery every day," Mia said softly. "Last month, there was this woman. She'd been struggling for years, but she did it, one day at a time. Now she's 6 months sober and rebuilding her relationship with her kids." Jack's eyes grew misty. "You really think I could?" "I do," Mia nodded, "and I'll be here to support you." After some discussion, Jack agreed to visit the hospital. During the drive, he kept fidgeting with his shirt collar, clearly nervous. Mia filled the silence with gentle conversation, telling him about her work and the dedicated staff at the recovery center. The counselor, a kind-faced woman named Sarah, walked them through the program details in her office. Jack listened intently, asking questions about the schedule and therapy sessions. His voice shook when he asked about success rates, but Sarah's calm answers seemed to ease his anxiety. "The first step is always the hardest," Sarah explained, "but you won't be alone." Mia reached over and squeezed Jack's hand. "She's right. I'll be here for you through all of it." Jack's eyes welled up as he signed the intake forms. "Thank you, Mia, for believing in me when I don't deserve it." "This is just the beginning," Mia smiled warmly. "But we'll take it one day at a time." They left the counselor's office together, Jack clutching his program schedule, ready to begin his journey toward recovery with his daughter by his side. Mia pulled into the hospital parking lot, glancing at Jack in the passenger seat. His knee bounced nervously, and his fingers drummed against the door handle. "We're a bit early," she said softly. "Want to grab a coffee first?" Jack shook his head. "If I don't do this now, I might lose my nerve." They walked through the hospital corridors to the rehab wing, where Sarah, the counselor, greeted them with a warm smile. "Good morning. Let's get you settled in, Jack." In Sarah's office, she explained the daily schedule. "We start with morning meditation, then group therapy. Afternoons are for individual counseling and activities." Jack's hands trembled as he clutched the paperwork. What if I can't handle it?" Mia touched his arm. "Remember what we talked about? One day at a time." "The first few days are the hardest," Sarah added, "but our staff is here 24/7. You're not alone in this." As they walked to the intake area, Jack stopped suddenly. "Mia, maybe this was a mistake. Maybe I should try getting clean on my own." "Dad," Mia said, the word feeling new on her tongue. "You don't have to do this alone anymore. I'll visit every week. We can have lunch together in the garden, talk about our days." A nurse approached with admission forms and a clipboard. "Mr. Reynolds, we're ready for you." Jack's grip tightened on Mia's hand. "Promise you'll come?" "Every week," Mia assured him. "And when you're done here, we can start building something new. Together." The nurse explained the rules: scheduled meals, visiting hours, therapy sessions. Jack nodded along, but his eyes kept finding Mia's, seeking reassurance. And when it was time to say goodbye, Mia pulled him into a tight hug. "I'm so proud of you for doing this," she whispered. "I'll see you next weekend." Jack held on for a moment longer. "Thank you, sweetheart, for giving me another chance." Mia watched as the nurse led Jack down the hallway toward his room. He turned back once, giving her a small wave, his shoulders straighter than before, carrying a glimmer of hope for the future. During a session, Jack stared at the bland beige walls of his room, fighting the urge to pack his bags and walk out. The first few days of rehab felt like an eternity. Every morning started with meditation, something he'd never done before, followed by endless therapy sessions that forced him to confront his demons. "Remember why you're here," he whispered to himself, pulling out the small photo of Mia he kept in his pocket. During group sessions, other patients shared their stories, but Jack struggled to open up. His counselor, Dr. Martinez, noticed his resistance. "Recovery isn't just about staying sober, Jack," she said during their one-on-one session. "It's about understanding what led you here." The nights were the hardest. Without alcohol to numb his thoughts, memories of his failures kept him awake. But each time he considered leaving, Mia's face appeared in his mind, giving him strength to stay another day. When Saturday finally arrived, Jack waited anxiously in the visitor's room. His heart lifted when Mia walked in, carrying a worn photo album. "Hi, Dad," she said softly, sitting beside him. "How are you holding up?" "It's different," he admitted. "Sometimes I wonder if I can do this." Mia opened the album, pointing to a photo of her high school graduation. "This was one of the biggest days of my life. Jennifer and Mark were there, but I wished you could have been too." Jack's hands trembled as he touched the photo. "You look so happy." "I was." Mia nodded, turning the page. "And look, here's my first day of nursing school. Mark took this picture right before my first class." As they went through the album together, Jack saw glimpses of the life he'd missed, birthdays, holidays, ordinary moments that should have included him. The pain in his chest felt sharp, but different from before. This time, it came with determination. "Your foster parents," he said quietly. "They gave you everything I couldn't." "They did," Mia agreed. "But Dad, I'm not showing you these to make you feel bad. I want you to see that there's still time for us to make new memories." Jack wiped his eyes, overwhelmed by her forgiveness. "The program, it's harder than I expected. But seeing these photos, hearing your stories, it helps me understand what I'm fighting for." "Then keep fighting," Mia squeezed his hand. "I'll be here every week, cheering you on." When visiting hours ended, Mia left him with the album. "Something to look at when things get tough," she explained. Jack watched her walk away, clutching the album to his chest. For the first time since entering rehab, he felt truly ready to face the challenge ahead. Not just for himself, but for the chance to be part of Mia's future stories. Soon after, Jack sat on the edge of his bed, his hands trembling after another intense therapy session. Dr. Chandler had asked him about Lisa, Mia's mother, and the memories came flooding back. The fights, the drinking, the way he'd spiraled deeper after she passed away. The weight of his failures pressed down on his chest, making it hard to breathe. "Tell me about the day you lost custody," Dr. Chandler had prompted gently. Jack could barely get the words out. "I was drunk. Again. Mia was crying, hungry probably. The neighbors called CPS." His voice cracked. "I couldn't even stand up straight when they came." Now, alone in his room, those memories haunted him. The thought of facing another day of therapy, of digging through more painful moments, made him want to run. Time passed, and he slowly fought through these memories, getting better one day at a time, hoping to lead a normal life with his daughter again. 6 months ago, I couldn't look at myself in the mirror, he shared with the circle of newcomers. I'd lost everything, my daughter, my self-respect, any chance at a real life. But sitting right here, in these same chairs where you're sitting now, something changed. A young man with trembling hands raised his head. How did you do it? Jack leaned forward, his eyes kind. One day at a time. And I had something worth fighting for. My daughter Mia. She believed in me, even when I couldn't believe in myself. Later that afternoon, Mia arrived for her weekly visit. Jack met her in the garden, his favorite spot for their talks. The leaves were turning golden, much like the new chapter unfolding in their lives. The counselor says I'm making real progress, Jack said, his voice soft with emotion. But there's something I need to tell you, Mia. She sat beside him on the wooden bench, waiting patiently. I've been doing a lot of thinking about the past, Jack continued, his hands clasped tightly. About all the birthdays I missed, the school plays, the times you needed me and I wasn't there. I was so lost in my own pain after your mother died that I couldn't see how much I was hurting you. Tears welled in his eyes. I'm sorry, Mia. I'm sorry for every moment I chose the bottle over you, for every time you went to bed hungry or scared, for making you feel like you weren't enough to make me want to change. Mia reached out and took his hand. Dad, I see how hard you're working now, how much you've changed. The man who helps other patients, who faces his fears every day in therapy. That's the father I always knew you could be. I don't deserve your forgiveness, Jack whispered. Maybe not, Mia agreed gently. But you have it anyway, and I'm proud of you, Dad. Really proud. Jack looked at his daughter, seeing the strength and compassion in her eyes. The same eyes that had once looked at him with fear now held hope and love. It overwhelmed him, this gift of a second chance. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching leaves dance in the breeze. Everything felt different now, lighter, clearer, full of possibility. Jack knew he would never take this gift for granted again. As their visit drew to a close, Mia hugged him tightly. Keep going, Dad. You're doing great. Jack held on to that moment, storing it away with all the other precious memories he was finally worthy of making with his daughter. 3 weeks later, Jack packed his few belongings into a small duffel bag. His hands trembled slightly, but not from withdrawal this time, from pure emotion. 8 months of hard work, tears, and transformation had led to this moment. You've come a long way, Jack, his counselor said, standing in the doorway. Remember what we talked about. One day at a time. Jack nodded, zipping up the bag. I never thought I'd make it this far, he admitted. There were days I wanted to give up, but you didn't, the counselor finished with a smile. That's what matters. In the common room, several patients and staff members gathered to say goodbye. Tom, a younger patient who'd arrived just 2 months ago, stepped forward with tears in his eyes. You showed me it was possible, Tom said quietly. When you shared your story that first week I was here, about your daughter and wanting to change, it gave me hope. Jack pulled him into a quick hug. You've got this, Tom. Just keep doing the work. The head nurse handed Jack his discharge papers, her kind eyes crinkling at the corners. We're all so proud of you, Jack. You're not the same man who walked through those doors 8 months ago. Thank you, Jack managed, his voice thick with emotion. All of you. I wouldn't be standing here without your help. As he made his way to the lobby, memories of his first days in rehab flooded back. The shakes, the fear, the shame. But those dark moments had led him here, to this new beginning. The lobby doors opened and there stood Mia, holding a bouquet of bright yellow sunflowers. Jack's heart swelled at the sight of his daughter, her face beaming with pride. Dad! She rushed forward, wrapping him in a tight hug. The flowers crushed between them, but neither seemed to mind. My girl, Jack whispered, holding her close. I did it, Mia. I really did it. Mia pulled back, wiping happy tears from her cheeks. I knew you could. These are for you, she said, straightening the slightly squashed flowers. Yellow for new beginnings. Jack took the bouquet, touched by the gesture. They're perfect. He looked around the lobby one last time, taking in the place that had become his sanctuary of healing. I'm nervous, he admitted. Being out there again? That's normal, Mia assured him, taking his free hand. But you're not alone anymore, Dad. We'll figure it out together. They walked toward the exit, Jack carrying his duffel bag and flowers while Mia kept her hand firmly in his. At the door, he paused. "I want you to know," he said, turning to face her, "that every hard day, every struggle in here, it was worth it, because it brought me back to you. I'm going to spend every day trying to be the father you deserve." Mia squeezed his hand. "You already are, Dad. By choosing to get better, by sticking with it even when it was hard. That's what a good father does." Together, they stepped out into the bright morning sun. Jack took a deep breath of fresh air, feeling lighter than he had in years. As they walked to Mia's car, they talked about small, everyday things: where he would live, his upcoming job interview at a local construction company, the weekly AA meetings he'd already found nearby. "One day at a time," Jack said, echoing his counselor's words as Mia opened the car door for him. "One day at a time," she agreed with a warm smile. "And I'll be right here with you." If you enjoyed the story of Mia, I hand-picked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.